Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. In my previous video, I promised that if I get enough likes that I was going to do something like this using Bricks interactions. I'm not quite sure if I got enough likes. I didn't have up to 20% of likes, but I'm still going to do this, but not in this video. Now, I thought that before I do something like this that involve sort of a bit more complex layout, I should start with the basics of Bricks interactions. So in this video, we're going to be doing this, and then I'm going to go ahead and click this, and you can see that this image changes and the colors of this font and the button changes also. If I click here, you see, so the color changes depending on the color of the image, and also the background image changes. Now all these are done using interaction, and the reason I'm going to do this instead of doing the other one is that you're going to learn a lot more about Bricks interaction doing this, and then in subsequent video I can do this one. So let's start with the basics of interactions in Bricks Builder. So what is interactions? Now interactions lets you bind a certain user event to trigger an action. For example, a user event can be a mouse click. So when you are clicking on the mouse, you're interacting with the web page. When you are hovering, you are interacting. That is a user event. When you're scrolling, that is a user event. It could also be a browser event, for example, when the browser just loads. So all those are events that can be used to trigger an action. So the actions that could be triggered could be to add a class to a specific element. You could add an attribute to a specific element. You could toggle a specific class. You could hide a specific element. You could show a specific element. You could show a pop-up, or you could remove an attribute or add an attribute. So we're going to take a look at the events available in Bricks interactions and the associated actions that you can trigger using these events. So here in Bricks, I'm going to add a section. I just need an element that I'm going to apply an interaction to. To apply interaction to an element in Bricks Builder, you're going to go to this icon here. Now ignore all the myriads of icons that I have here. These are from a builder add-on called Advanced Thema, so just ignore it. But this icon that looks like a finger hovering on something, so just click that, and once you click that, you're going to see this panel called interactions, and the next thing you want to do is to click the plus sign to add an interaction. And by default, you're going to see that this interaction has three major fields. The first field is the trigger. Now this trigger is the event, so it is either a user event or a browser event. So this is browser event, this is a user event. So you have the click event, and this deals with what happens when a user clicks an element. You have the hover, this deals with what happens when you hover on an element. The focus event means when the element is being focused, like you're using a tab key or you're actually clicking on that element to focus on it. Then the blur event means when the element loses focus. For example, you clicked on something and then you click outside. You see, now that I've clicked on this container, it receives focus, but if I click outside of it, it loses focus. That means it has a blur event. Let's go back here. Now the mouse enters just is similar to hover, and the mouse leave. So mouse enter is what happens when the mouse enters the object, and when the mouse leaves the object, what happens. Now what the difference between that and hover is that hover takes care of what happens when you hover, when the mouse enters, and then it doesn't account for when the mouse leaves. But this specifically breaks this into two: mouse enter and mouse leave. Now enter viewport has to do with what happens when an element scrolls into the viewport. So I'm going to quickly demonstrate some of these things. Now I'm going to drop into containers here, and I'm just going to go ahead and give them a class of int columns. Let me just interaction column. Okay, I'm going to copy this style and paste here. Doing that is going to copy the class also. All right, I'm going to select this, and then I want to give it a minimum height of 400 pixel. So let's give them. All right, and then I think I'd like to give them just a simple background color. I'm going to save this. And let's look at the front end just to be sure that we have, yeah, so I have that. I'm going to give it a gap, the container gap, just to that, yep, just give that a gap. Anyway, so now I'm going to apply an interaction to this element, and we want to test the click action. So I'm just going to go here It says, I'm going to say on click, when I click this element, I want something to happen to this element. So when I click, so I'm going to give this element a class of target. All right. So when I click on this element, now this, so let's check what is going to happen. So what I want to do is to hide this one. So when I click on this, I want to hide the target. So the target is going to be a CSS selector, and the CSS selector is the class interaction target. Okay, because we've given this a class of interaction target. So when I click on this, I want the interaction target to disappear. So I'm just going to save that. So I'm saying hide element, that's the action. So remember, events and action. So you click on this and that disappears. So that is it. Now let's do hover. I'm going to save that. And then when I hover on it, it disappears. Okay, you see, nothing happens when I bring my mouse out. But then if I change this to mouse enter, let's refresh that. Mouse enter is going to disappear. If I duplicate this and change this one to mouse leave, and I want this to show element. So now I've created two interactions, one with mouse enter and one with mouse leave. I'm going to save this again, and then I'm going to take a look at it. Mouse enter, mouse leave, mouse enter, mouse leave. So you see what is happening. Now I'm going to delete this one, and then let's continue. The next one is blur, or maybe on focus and on blur. So on focus is kind of like if you click on the object, you're focusing on the object. Now if you use the tab key to focus on the object, you're also focusing on it. So I'm gonna say focus. Let's do that. Now it might not work because this might not be a focusable element. A focusable element is something like a link or a button, but let's just see. So you see it doesn't work. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to, for this to work, it has to be either a link or a button to receive focus. So I'm going to go ahead and change the HTML tag to button, and then just going to write button. Now that is now a focusable element. So now if I click on it, you can see that this one disappears. But then if I change that interaction to blur, see what is going to happen. I'm going to change it to blur. Blur means when it loses focus. Now, if I click on it, nothing happens. But if I go out and click outside, that event is triggered. So that is on blur. Now let me refresh that again. I'm going to use the keyboard to tap. Now I've tapped. Now you see it receives focus. Once I tap again and it loses focus, that means it is blurred. You see, it loses focus and the action takes place. So you understand what is going on here. Then I'm going to add an attribute. I want to show you one more thing. So I'm going to say on click, I want to add an attribute. Now this, I want to give this a class of the target also. Okay. All right. So now I'll go to the attribute, and then I want to add an attribute. I want to set an attribute. An attribute is an HTML property that provides additional information about an element. For example, a class is an attribute. The source of an image is an attribute. Area label is an attribute. So there are different kinds of attribute. An ID is an attribute. So now when you say set attribute, now this is key. The key means what attribute are you looking for? You could also remove an attribute. I want to set an attribute. And then the key is just going to be, let's say, area label. Then I'm just going to say, I am a square or a rectangle. Then I'm going to save this, and we go to the front end. Let's refresh. Then I'm going to select this because this is the target. Okay. And this target right now does not have any area attribute. When I come here and click this, you see that it comes in to add. Okay. It adds it to self because we chose what? Self. But if I wanted to add to this one, I would have chosen a CSS selector, and then I will add that class int target. I'm going to save it. We're going to monitor the second button. So once we click the first one, an attribute is going to be added. Area label, I am a rectangle. So with these, there is a lot of possibilities, a lot of things you can do with these interactions. So with what we have learned so far, we're going to go ahead and build something like this. So let's take a look at it again. Now, if I click here, the background color of the section changes. The color of this text changes. The color and the outline of the button changes. This image here changes. When I click here, the same thing. So the background changes to match with the color of the image that is being clicked. And the text also and the button changes accordingly. So we're going to see how to use Bricks interaction to build something like this. Okay, hold up. Before I continue, I want you to take your time to do something. I want you to do something for me. Do me a favor. I want you to hit the thumbs up because I need many likes on this video. And let me tell you what the like does. It helps YouTube recommend these videos to others who are looking for similar things. So help me reach more people by hitting the thumbs up. That is one way you can appreciate the channel. There are other ways you could appreciate the channel. You could use the thank you button right there, but you don't have to. But this one, I'm really saying, please hit the thumbs up if you like this tutorial and you like the direction we're going so far. Thank you very much. So I'm just going to take away all of this, and then I'm going to add a new section. And in this section, I'm going to drop in 2 blocks. And this section, I want it to be display grid. The content, I want it to display grid, and then I'm going to choose grid 2 and I give it a grid gap. Okay, so for this one, I want to quickly add a heading, text, and a button. So for that text, I'm just going to go ahead and copy let me close this for now. I'm going to go ahead and copy love me some, then I'm going to paste there. And for the text style, I want to give it a font of caveat, and I want to give it 10 rem of font size, maybe 18 rem. So let's see how that looks. And then for these, I'm just going to drop some lorem ipsum. All right. And I'm going to select this and just space it out like row gap. And I'm going to call this grab it now. On this side, I want to drop in two blocks. So I'm going to put a first block here. I'm going to put in a second block still on the parent level. The one at the top is going to be where we're going to place our image. I want it to be a minimum height of 500 pixels. I'm just going to give it a minimum height of 500 pixels. And then in here, I need 3 blocks. So I'm going to drop in 3 blocks. Now, all these shortcuts are coming from an add-on called Advanced Theme. So that's what I'm using. So if you haven't seen a video I made about Advanced Theme, I'm going to link it at the top right corner right here. Okay, so it just makes the workflow faster. Anyway, so I make these. I'm going to make it display grid. And I'm just going to choose grid 3. And then I give it a grid gap. Okay, so I'm going to add an image there. And then I'm going to select an image. So this is the first one is going to be my blue. And let's see how it looks. And then for this, I want to give it a background image. And the background image is going to be the same blue snack. I'm going to set the background position to center. And then I want the background size to be contained, and I don't want repeat, no repeat. Let's take a look at the front end and see what. I'm going to close this. So we have an idea of what the kind of things we want. I need to have a separation between these 2 blocks. Okay, so I'm going to go to the parent. Then I'm going to give it a row gap of content gap. But for this one, I need this image to be a bit smaller. For it to be smaller, I want the gaps between the grids, between these 3 to be much more. That is going to force this image to become smaller. And then I'm going to give the div, the parent div of the image, some paddings. But let me just go ahead and give that padding first of all. But before I do that, I want to give it a class. I'm just going to call this int image button btn. So that is going to be a button, an image button. And then I'm going to give it a padding of extra small all around. I don't want it to have a lot of padding. And I'm just going to give this section a background. So let's just give the section a blue background. I'm going to call it int section. The reason you want to give these classes is because you want to, for some reason, that already had a background color. I think I already used that class, and that background color, yeah, should apply it. So actually, that is the background color that I chose for it. Oh, I'm going to delete these 2, I mean, and then I'm going to duplicate this. So we have 3 images. I'm going to change this one to the orange. Then I'm going to change this. Then I'm going to go to the parent container for the 3 of them, and then I'm going to increase the grid gap to X space XXL. So it spreads them apart, and as a result, it's going to make them smaller. Let's look at it at the front end. So you see they are smaller. I'm going to select this, and this is supposed to be our button. So each of this is supposed to be the button. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to, I should have done that before duplicating, but I'm going to change the tag. I'm going to change it to button. Now, as I change the tag to button, immediately you see there's a background, and a button has a default styling applied to it by the browser or by the builder. So we're going to remove that default styling. I'm going to go to CSS. I'm going to write root and maybe root button, and then I'm going to just say background transparent, and it did not work. How about we just say root? So I'm going to select this, and I'm going to also make it a button. I'm going to say custom button. 3 of them are going to be buttons. Custom button. So if I click now and save it, we go to the front end to see, you're going to see that it's now, you can hover on it, and then you can also focus. You can see that focus line. Now we're going to apply interactions to these 3 blocks, but we want to apply it to the ID. If I click here and I make sure and the class is selected and I go to interactions, that means that interaction is applied to the class, not the ID. Let me say I set an interaction. I said on click, set attribute. I'm just going to say data BG, and value I'm going to say blue. Then the target is going to be a CSS selector, which is going to be our section. So we wanted to add, let's look at that class again for the section. Close this. Yes, that is this class. So now I'm going to select this. So we see an interaction. Now if I go to this block, now I'm going to close this. If I go to this block, the second one, and then I select the class, you can see that it has that same interaction. That means that we cannot set different interactions to the different button that uses the same class. Therefore, we have to apply that interaction to the ID. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to delete this interaction from the class. I'm going to go back to the first one, and then I'm going to make sure that the class is not selected before I chose interaction. Then I'm going to add interaction on click. We want to set an attribute, and that attribute is going to be data BG, and the value is going to be blue, and the target is going to be the CSS selector .int-section. We're going to save and test for the first button. I'm going to open that and select the section, so you can see the section doesn't have any data attribute. Now I'm going to click on this, and you can see it adds data BG blue to it. Now I want to go ahead and do the same for the remaining 2 buttons. And once we click on the second button, we want to have that interaction. Now, which one is easier, to write interaction or to replace images? I think replacing images is easier. So I'm just going to delete this and this. Then I'm going to duplicate these 2. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just quickly change the image. The center image was this, and this one, the image was the green. That's just to avoid writing the interaction all over. So I'm going to come here to this one, and this second one, the value of the data BG is going to be orange, and then the third one, the value will be green. I'm going to save this, and then we'll go to the front end, and let's take a look at that section again. So I'm going to select this section, take a look at it. When I click the first one, data BG is going to be blue. When I click the second one, the data BG changes to orange. When I click the third one, the data BG changes to green. Now this is the reason we are using data BG, because you can replace the value. Let's say we were using class, and say when we add this, add a class green or blue to it. When we click this, add a class orange to it. When we click this, add a class wave. Now when we do that, it wouldn't give us the result we are trying to achieve, because those 3 classes will eventually be added to the section, and the section will have all the 3 classes at once. But we want a situation whereby whatever is going to control the background color and every other thing is going to be replaced and not added. So we don't want green, blue, and orange to be at the same time. We don't want it to be, to appear at the same time, because we want to be able to change the background when this changes. And then I'm going to close this. I'm going to go to the custom CSS of this section, and then I'm going to write root, and I'm going to open and close those square bracket. I'm going to write data bg equals to blue, and I'm going to give that a background of my secondary color. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste this. And then I'm going to change this to orange. And that orange was my accent. So I'm just going to copy this. And then I'm going to say green. The background is going to be primary medium, right? We have declared some CSS styles. So we're saying when the data BG is blue, change the color to this color. When the data BG is orange, change it to this color. When the data BG is green, change it to this color. Let's see if that is going to work. I'm going to go to the front end, and then blue is blue. This, okay, it's just refreshing. So blue is blue. This, all right, that works. This changes to orange, and this changes to green. When we go back to blue, blue changes. So right now, what we're going to do is to add a transition to it, because we want it to fade in. So I'm just going to say root transition. It's going to be 0.4 seconds, but I want it to have a slight delay of 0.2 seconds. So when I click it, it doesn't change immediately, just for added effect. So it's going to refresh. Let me close this. So when I click here, it changes. Click here, it changes. Click here, it changes. Click here, it changes. You can see that transition. Now onto this, we want to change this. Now let's go to the front end. I'm going to right click and inspect. You're going to see that this has a background image, and this background image URL is a property that we want to swap out. I'm going to right click and copy that declaration, and then I'm going to come here to this where we have that image, okay? And I want to give it a class, int image swap, okay? That's where we're going to swap our image. I'm going to go to the CSS. I'm going to write root, and that is going to have our background image declaration. So what we need to do is to change this. So what I'm going to do here, so I'm going to target, I'm going to use the section data attribute to target this. I'm going to open and close the square bracket, and then I'm going to say data attribute, data bg falls to blue. So we want to take the URL of this image, the blue image. So let's go back to the back end. Yep. And then we're going to go to media. So I want to copy the URL of that. So the blue one, so I'm just going to copy the relative path. Now, if you haven't seen my video on 5 things you have to do to your WordPress website before you start building, check it out, because the advantage is that you don't need to have the long URL. You can copy a relative path. So anyway, so I'm just going to replace this. Okay, so we have blue PNG. I'm just going to copy this. And then, so what we're saying is this: when the section has a data BG of blue, change the background image to blue.png. I'm going to paste this. When it has an attribute of orange, target the root. That is, the root is this element that we are on now, and change it to orange. So I labeled the images according to the numbers, so it's going to be easy to just change. And then this is going to be green, so this is going to be green too. And I'm going to save that, and then we're going to look at the front end. So when I click here, nothing happens because it's already blue. When I click here, nothing happens. This changes, but the image doesn't change. So let's see. So you can see here that data BG is there, but this original background is overriding it. So the reason, so you can see that it's changing, okay? You can see that blue changes to blue. When I click here, it changes to orange. And then when I click this, it changes to green, okay? Now, the reason it's overriding is because the ID has a stronger specificity than the class. So it's not going to be able, the class will not be able to override the ID normally. So I'm going to go back there, and I'm going to go to the background, and then I'm going to just remove that Okay, I'm going to remove both the height and the background, and then I want to set it, the height, that minimum height was 500, and then the background I want to set it on the class, and I just want to select the first image, which is the blue image, and I want to go back and do the same thing, center, no repeat, and contain. Let's save that and then go to the front end again. By now our trick should work. So if I click here, you see it changes. I click here, it changes. Click here, it changes. Click here, it changes. Now it changes abruptly. What we want to do, we want it to fade. So I'm going to go back there, go to the custom CSS, and then I'm just going to give it a transition. So I'm going to say root. I'm just going to give it a transition of 0.6 seconds. And then we're going to see what it looks like. Let's see. See, now it fades, and fades. Now for this, what I'm going to do for this one, first of all, let me select that text. I'm going to go into typography. Let's give it a line height of 1. I want our text to look good, so let me reduce it. The color, I want it to be white. But what I'm going to do is I will move all these styles to a class. So I'm going to call this int heading. And then I'm just going to copy styles from the ID and paste them on the class. Then I'm going to delete all the class from the ID. So now all the classes are on the class. All right. Now I'm going to go in here to the content, and this word sum, I'm going to wrap it in a span. So I'm going to go to the CSS section. I want to write some CSS, but to make it easy, I'm going to go to the section and copy the CSS from the section, and then come back here, and then I'm going to paste it there. And then with that, I'm going to modify it because we still need some of these colors. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to change background color to color. Okay. So this is now going to be color. Now going to be color. And now what will happen is I'm going to remove the root from here, because now we want to use the section to target the span in this selector. So now we're going to write, we already have data bg blue, put a space, write root, which means target the text, target this class. If you want to know how to use custom CSS in Bricks Builder, I have a video. I'm going to link it at the top right corner so you understand why we write these things the way we write it. Now we want to write root, and that root has a span. So we're going to do the same for all of them. I'm going to copy and paste here. Copy and paste here. So this class has a span inside it, which is this span. So what we are saying is when a data attribute is added to this section, target this class and target the span in it and change the color. So let's see what happens there. So we have that, and the transition will be the transition of the span. So let me add the span there. So I'm just going to make that transition 0.8 seconds because I don't want to have a delay. And then the initial color should be the blue color, which is this. So I'm going to just say color that. So we have that initial color, but it's too much. So I'm going to give it something brighter. So I'm going to just put dash light there. So that gives me a bright light color. It's not really giving me what I want. Anyway, we'll go to the front end and we can make changes to that. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to go to the front end. So now when I click here, this color changes to orange. But the problem is that it's orange. We need it to be like something like this, where we have brighter version of it. Okay, I think my own, we had a darker versions. So I'm going to select my background and make my background darker shades of the colors. So I'm just going to say these are dark, these dark, primary. I think it should be dark also. So if we make that dark versions, the real colors will come up. You see, so dark, okay, so we have that green. So now we could go back to the text and make the green just the primary instead of medium, just for you to get the right colors. And then once you get the right colors, so the default background of the section should be that same dark. So I'm going to go to the section, I'm going to change that background color to primary, sorry, secondary dark. That's what we choose, right? Save that. We have the initial setup, and then I'm going to save, click this. So this initial setup should also be secondary. Just change it back to secondary, since we're trying to get our colors right? So just to tidy up, I'm going to just give this text a color of white, and I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger. That is just pure styling, nothing much. And then for this, we could change the color of this also based on that. So what we're going to do is, I'm going to go to the section once again. So I'm going to copy the CSS from the section. I will come to the button. I really don't need to give it a class, but if you want, you could give it a class. I'm just going to paste this here. And then the background is not going to be dark. It's just going to be, because the dark is just for the background, for the section background. So this is just going to be the regular colors, just like the text. And we're going to have that transition without any delay, which is going to be 0.8 also. But then we are now targeting the bottom, which is the root. Now what we have here is background, which is the background of the button. So if the button changes to a dark color, then we need to set the color to white, because all those dark colors, I'm not quite sure they're going to play well with black. So I'm going to just change the color to white. I'm going to copy that and paste for all of them. And let's save and see what we have finally. Now if I click here, oh yeah, so we made a mistake. I made a mistake and I left these roots here when we copied it from the section. So yeah, let's remove that, and that should work. So I'm going to click here. It says grab this, grab this, grab that. Okay, we have those different color options. All right, so you could tweak the color to suit whatever you want. Play around with it, play around with the different forms of interaction. So if you want to change it to hover, you could always go back here and then just change this to hover. Now unfortunately, Bricks doesn't have the option to copy interaction, which would have been a very great thing and a very huge time saver. But right now, if you hover, you see it changes. So it depends on what you want to do. So that brings an end to the basics of Bricks interaction. I haven't forgotten the other interaction effect you saw in the beginning of this tutorial. I'm still going to bring that your way and show you how it was done. But right now, I want you to let me know what you think about this tutorial. If you loved it, comment on the section. Let me know what else you would like to know how to do using the interactions. If you have any questions, you ask in the section, in the comment section, and I'm going to do my best to respond to them. Until next time, have a great day. Bye.